Welcome to our channel, the home of knowledge, curiosity, and storytelling. We uncover forgotten histories, decode ancient secrets, and bring you insights that inspire. Get ready to travel through time and imagination. Now we explain the role of agriculture in the rise and development of ancient civilizations, foundations, innovations, and lasting legacy.
The role of agriculture in the formation and development of ancient civilizations cannot be overstated. Agriculture stands as one of the most transformative forces in human history, reshaping not only the physical environment, but also the very structure of human societies. The origins of agriculture mark the critical shift from nomadic hunting and gathering to settled, food-producing communities, a transition commonly known as the Neolithic Revolution. This transformation, which began around 10,000 BCE in different parts of the world, was not an isolated event, but rather a gradual process influenced by climatic changes, population pressures, and the human capacity for innovation. Understanding how agriculture emerged and evolved in ancient times provides essential insight into the foundation upon which complex societies, economies, and cultures were later built. Before the advent of agriculture, humans lived as hunter-gatherers for hundreds of thousands of years. These communities were small, mobile, and dependent on the availability of wild plants and animals. Their survival depended on environmental knowledge, seasonal migration, and cooperative social structures. However, this lifestyle imposed certain limitations. The mobility required by hunting and gathering prevented the accumulation of material goods and restricted population growth. As climatic conditions stabilized after the last ice age, around 11,000 BCE, many regions of the world experienced an increase in plant and animal species suitable for domestication. The warming climate led to the expansion of grasslands and forests, allowing humans to experiment with plant cultivation and animal herding. This gradual shift from foraging to farming did not occur simultaneously everywhere, but rather emerged independently in several regions, including the Fertile Crescent, the Nile Valley, the Indus Valley, the Yellow River Basin in China, and Mesoamerica. The Fertile Crescent, stretching across modern-day Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, Israel, and parts of Turkey and Iran, is often recognized as one of the earliest centers of agricultural innovation. Archaeological evidence from sites such as Jericho and Çatalhöyük demonstrates that early humans began to cultivate cereals like wheat and barley and to domesticate animals such as sheep and goats. These developments enabled stable food supplies and reduced the uncertainty associated with hunting and gathering. The cultivation of crops required the establishment of permanent or semi-permanent settlements, leading to the first forms of sedentary life. In these early villages, humans began constructing durable houses, storing surplus grains, and developing communal practices for managing resources. The emergence of food surplus fundamentally altered social relations, making possible the specialization of labor and the rise of new social hierarchies. Agriculture did not simply provide food, it transformed the relationship between humans and nature. The act of sowing seeds, irrigating land, and breeding animals represented humanity's growing ability to manipulate the environment. Over time, people learned to select plants with desirable traits, such as larger seeds or faster growth, and to breed animals for docility and productivity. These practices laid the foundation for domestication, which in turn made agricultural yields more predictable. However, the shift to farming also had profound ecological and social consequences. The clearing of forests for fields, the management of water systems, and the concentration of populations in fixed locations led to new challenges, including soil depletion, disease, and the need for organized social coordination. Thus, agriculture was both a solution to scarcity and a source of new complexities.
The Neolithic Revolution was not merely an economic transformation, it was an intellectual and cultural one as well. The change from a mobile lifestyle to permanent settlements altered human perception of time, space, and community. Agricultural societies developed calendars to track seasons and plan planting cycles, giving rise to early forms of astronomy and record-keeping. The concept of land ownership emerged, marking a departure from the communal sharing of resources typical of hunter-gatherer groups. This development had far-reaching implications for social organization, as control over land and surplus food became sources of power and inequality. In this sense, agriculture was the seed from which political and economic systems would later grow. Different regions of the world developed agriculture according to their unique ecological and cultural contexts. In the Nile Valley, the predictable flooding of the river provided fertile soil that sustained Egypt's agrarian economy for millennia. In the Indus Valley, agricultural practices were shaped by the seasonal monsoons, while in ancient China, rice and millet cultivation thrived along the Yellow and Yangtze rivers. In Mesoamerica, maize became the cornerstone of agricultural societies, while in the Andes, the cultivation of potatoes and quinoa supported the growth of complex cultures such as the Inca. These parallel developments illustrate that agriculture was not a singular invention, but a convergent adaptation, an example of how humans in different environments responded similarly to shared challenges of subsistence and stability. As agricultural practices spread, they encouraged population growth and the formation of larger, more complex communities. Permanent settlements facilitated the development of new technologies, such as pottery for storage, weaving for clothing, and metallurgy for tools. The ability to produce food surpluses meant that not everyone had to engage in farming. Some individuals could specialize in crafts, trade, or governance, leading to the diversification of social roles. This specialization was a critical precursor to the rise of urban centers and states. Indeed, it was through agriculture that the conditions for civilization, defined by cities, written language, organized religion, and centralized authority, first emerged. The relationship between agriculture and social structure was deeply symbiotic. As farming became more efficient and productive, societies grew increasingly stratified. Those who controlled land and water resources accumulated wealth and influence, while others provided labor. Over time, this led to the establishment of formal systems of governance and law to regulate agricultural production and resource distribution. In early Mesopotamian cities, for example, temples and priests played a central role in managing grain storage and irrigation, reinforcing the connection between agriculture and religion. Similarly, in ancient Egypt, the pharaoh's authority was closely tied to his role as the guardian of the Nile's fertility. Thus, from its inception, agriculture was not merely an economic activity, it was the organizing principle of civilization itself. The shift to agriculture also had demographic consequences. Stable food sources enabled populations to expand rapidly, leading to increased density and the need for more complex social coordination. This, in turn, fostered the development of political systems and the emergence of leadership structures capable of organizing labor, resolving conflicts, and planning for the future. The accumulation of surplus food supported not only larger populations, but also cultural and intellectual pursuits. Art, architecture, religion, and writing all flourished in societies where agriculture had secured the material foundation for stability and growth.
In summary, the origins of agriculture mark the defining threshold in human history, the point at which humans began to transform nature to serve their needs, and in doing so, transformed themselves. It was agriculture that enabled the transition from small, nomadic bands to settled, complex societies capable of monumental achievements. Yet, this transformation came with new challenges: inequality, environmental stress, and social hierarchies that would shape the trajectory of human civilization for millennia to come. As we proceed to examine the role of agriculture in the rise of specific ancient civilizations, it becomes clear that this foundational innovation was the cornerstone upon which the edifice of human progress was built.
Agriculture was the fundamental engine that propelled the emergence and consolidation of the world's earliest civilizations. By providing stable and predictable food sources, agriculture enabled the growth of permanent settlements, the accumulation of surplus, and the rise of complex social hierarchies. These developments, in turn, laid the foundation for political authority, economic specialization, technological innovation, and cultural expression.
Ancient civilizations across different regions, though diverse in geography and culture, shared this reliance on agricultural productivity as the backbone of societal development. This section examines the role of agriculture in several key civilizations, highlighting both shared patterns and distinctive regional adaptations. Mesopotamia, located between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, offers one of the earliest examples of the centrality of agriculture in human civilization. The fertile alluvial soil and abundant water made possible the cultivation of barley, wheat, lentils, and flax, as well as the domestication of animals such as sheep, goats, and cattle. However, Mesopotamia's unpredictable flooding necessitated sophisticated irrigation and water management systems. Canals, levees, and reservoirs required coordinated labor and centralized oversight, catalyzing the emergence of administrative structures and proto-governmental institutions. Temples served as both religious and economic centers, controlling irrigation, granaries, and redistribution of surplus. This integration of agriculture, governance, and religion exemplifies how farming underpins social, political, and economic organization in early Mesopotamian cities like Uruk, Ur, and Lagash. The economic consequences of agricultural surplus in Mesopotamia were profound. Stable food supplies allowed populations to expand and specialize in labor beyond subsistence farming. Artisans, merchants, scribes, and administrators emerged, forming the first differentiated occupational classes. Trade networks developed, linking Mesopotamia with neighboring regions and facilitating the exchange of agricultural products, raw materials, and manufactured goods. The production of surplus grain also enabled wealth accumulation and the construction of monumental architecture, reinforcing social stratification. Legal codes, such as the Code of Hammurabi, codified the rights and responsibilities associated with land, labor, and resource management, demonstrating how agriculture directly influenced governance, social order, and law. Agricultural innovation in Mesopotamia spurred technological advancement and intellectual development. The development of the plow, irrigation tools, and bronze implements enhanced productivity, while observations of seasonal and celestial patterns informed calendars essential for agricultural planning. Writing, initially devised to track crop yields and trade, facilitated the administration of increasingly complex societies and supported the preservation and transmission of knowledge. Beyond its practical applications, agriculture influenced Mesopotamian culture and religious life, shaping mythology, ritual practices, and literary expression. Epic narratives often intertwined themes of fertility, labor, and human interaction with the environment, reflecting the centrality of farming to societal identity.
In Egypt, the Nile River provided a naturally predictable agricultural environment, differing from Mesopotamia's irregular floods. The annual inundation of the Nile deposited nutrient-rich silt on surrounding lands, ensuring reliable crop production. Egyptian farmers cultivated wheat, barley, flax, vegetables, and fruits, while domesticated animals supported labor and nutrition. The Nile's predictability allowed for precise calendrical systems, aligning agricultural activities with the river's cycles. The ability to produce surplus food facilitated the concentration of political power in the hands of the pharaoh, who was regarded as the divine guarantor of the land's fertility. Monumental construction projects, including pyramids and temples, were sustained by agricultural surpluses, underscoring the interdependence of farming, governance, and religion in Egyptian civilization. Egyptian agriculture fostered technological and organizational innovation. Irrigation basins, canals, and shadoof systems extended arable land and improved water management. The storage of grain in centralized granaries allowed for redistribution during periods of scarcity and reinforced the authority of state institutions. Economic specialization was supported, with artisans, scribes, and traders benefiting from agricultural stability. Egyptian religious festivals and rituals often revolved around agricultural cycles, reflecting an integrated worldview in which farming was both a practical necessity and a spiritual imperative. Moreover, the hieroglyphic writing system, used for administrative and ceremonial purposes, emerged in direct response to the needs of agricultural management, illustrating the profound link between farming and intellectual development. In ancient China, the fertile river valleys of the Yellow and Yangtze rivers supported the cultivation of millet and rice, respectively. The predictable hydrology of these rivers allowed early communities to develop intensive irrigation techniques and wet field rice agriculture. Agricultural productivity in China facilitated population growth, urban settlement, and the emergence of political hierarchies during the Xia, Shang, and Zhou dynasties. Agriculture's centrality to Chinese society is reflected in early philosophical and administrative texts, which emphasize the moral and practical obligations of rulers to ensure the fertility of the land and the well-being of the populace. The development of iron tools, plowing techniques, and flood control measures illustrates the interplay between agricultural necessity and technological advancement in shaping Chinese civilization.
Mesoamerican civilizations, such as the Maya and the Aztec, relied on maize as the foundation of their agricultural systems. In addition to maize, these societies cultivated beans, squash, chili peppers, and cacao, often employing techniques such as terracing, raised fields, and chinampas to maximize arable and in challenging environments. Agricultural productivity supported the growth of large urban centers, complex social hierarchies, and ceremonial and political institutions. Surplus maize enabled labor specialization, trade, and the production of monumental architecture, including temples and pyramids, reflecting the same pattern observed in Eurasian civilizations. Stable and productive agriculture underpinned societal complexity and cultural achievement. In Mesoamerica, the integration of agriculture, ritual practice, and political authority demonstrates that farming was both a material and ideological cornerstone of civilization. Similarly, Andean civilizations, including the Inca, relied on sophisticated agricultural strategies to adapt to high-altitude environments. Terracing, irrigation channels, and crop diversification, including potatoes, quinoa, and maize, allowed for the production of surplus food in mountainous regions. The organization of labor, centralized storage of crops, and redistribution through state mechanisms reinforced social cohesion and political authority. Agriculture in the Andes was closely linked to religious practices, with rituals and offerings intended to ensure fertility and abundant harvests. These examples illustrate that regardless of geography or environmental conditions, agriculture consistently functioned as the structural and cultural foundation upon which early civilizations were built. Across these diverse civilizations, several shared patterns emerge. First, agriculture facilitated population growth, urbanization, and social stratification. Second, surplus food production enabled labor specialization, trade, and technological innovation. Third, agricultural cycles influenced religious practices, intellectual activity, and cultural expression. Fourth, the management of agricultural resources required organizational structures and legal frameworks, fostering early forms of governance. Finally, agriculture's environmental impact prompted technological adaptation and environmental management strategies, highlighting the reciprocal relationship between human societies and their surroundings. In every region, the adoption of agriculture was not merely a means of subsistence, but a transformative process that shaped every aspect of human life, from economy to politics to culture and ideology. In conclusion, the role of agriculture in the rise of ancient civilizations was both foundational and transformative. From Mesopotamia to Egypt, the Indus Valley, China, Mesoamerica, and the Andes, the cultivation of crops and the domestication of animals enabled the development of surplus, social hierarchy, urbanization, and cultural complexity. Agricultural innovation drove technological advancement, facilitated intellectual and artistic expression, and structured political and religious life. While each civilization adapted agriculture to its unique environment, the underlying principles were consistent. Productive farming created the material conditions necessary for complex society, and the organization and management of these agricultural systems shaped governance, law, social relations, and culture. Without agriculture, the emergence of cities, states, and civilizations would have been impossible, making it the central and enduring foundation of human progress across the ancient world.
The development of agriculture in ancient civilizations left an enduring legacy that profoundly shaped human history.
Beyond merely providing sustenance, agriculture fundamentally restructured societies, economies, and cultural systems, laying the groundwork for urbanization, social stratification, technological innovation, trade networks, and the transmission of knowledge. By examining these long-term impacts, it becomes evident that agriculture was not merely an economic activity, but the foundation upon which human civilization was built, influencing subsequent generations for millennia. The interconnection of agricultural productivity with political authority, social organization, and cultural expression demonstrates that the legacy of farming is inseparable from the trajectory of civilization itself. One of the most significant impacts of agriculture was the facilitation of urbanization. The ability to produce surplus food enabled populations to concentrate in fixed settlements, ultimately giving rise to towns and cities. In Mesopotamia, Egypt, the Indus Valley, and China, these urban centers became hubs of political, religious, and economic activity. In Mesopotamia, cities such as Uruk and Ur contained tens of thousands of inhabitants and required complex administrative systems to manage irrigation, taxation, and trade. Similarly, in Egyptian cities relied on the annual Nile inundation to support agricultural productivity, which in turn sustained a large workforce for monumental construction projects. Urbanization also created opportunities for social specialization, as not all individuals were required to engage directly in farming. Artisans, scribes, merchants, and religious officials could emerge, creating the diversified occupational structure characteristic of complex societies. The concentration of populations in urban centers further facilitated cultural development, including the production of literature, art, and architecture, demonstrating that agriculture directly enabled both material and intellectual advancement. Agricultural surplus also profoundly influenced social hierarchy and political authority. The control of land, water, and stored food became central to the consolidation of power. In Mesopotamia, temple authorities and monarchs exercised significant control over grain stores, irrigation systems, and labor, effectively integrating economic management with religious and political governance. Similarly, in Egypt, the pharaoh's authority was intimately tied to the fertility of the Nile, with state officials overseeing the collection and redistribution of surplus crops. Social stratification emerged as those controlling agricultural resources accumulated wealth and influence, while tenant farmers, laborers, and artisans supported the system through their work. In the Indus Valley, although evidence suggests less pronounced hierarchical structures, centralized granaries and standardized measures indicate an organized approach to resource distribution and social coordination. Across civilizations, agriculture was not merely a means of subsistence, it was the principal driver of social organization, hierarchy, and governance, demonstrating that control over the land and its productivity became synonymous with political and economic power.
Technological innovation in agriculture was both a consequence of and a catalyst for societal complexity. Early civilizations developed tools and techniques to increase productivity, manage environmental constraints, and sustain larger populations. In Mesopotamia, innovations included the plow, bronze implements, and irrigation infrastructure that allowed for the intensification of farming. Egyptian agriculture benefited from the shaduf, basin irrigation, and canal systems, which maximized yields and allowed cultivation in previously marginal areas. In the Indus Valley, the management of water, field organization, and crop rotation reflected sophisticated agricultural engineering. Ancient China saw the development of iron tools and flood control measures to improve rice and millet production, while Mesoamerican civilizations employed terracing, raised fields, and chinampas to adapt to diverse topographies. The Andes exemplified ingenuity in high-altitude agriculture, with terrace systems and complex irrigation networks supporting potato, maize, and quinoa cultivation. These technological achievements highlight the intrinsic link between agriculture and human innovation, demonstrating that the challenges of food production spurred some of the earliest examples of engineering, mechanics, and environmental management. Trade networks were another significant outcome of agricultural surplus. The production of more food than immediately necessary allowed civilizations to exchange goods both locally and across long distances. In Mesopotamia, agricultural products, textiles, and crafted goods were traded with regions as distant as the Indus Valley, facilitating cultural exchange and economic integration. Egypt's surplus grain supported both domestic trade and exchange with neighboring regions, including Nubia and the Levant. In the Indus Valley, standardized weights and measures indicate the regulation of trade, suggesting that agriculture not only sustained local economies, but also underpinned complex commercial networks. In Mesoamerica and the Andes, surplus maize, potatoes, and other crops facilitated trade between ecological zones, supporting urban centers and enabling the movement of luxury items, raw materials, and technological knowledge. Through trade, agriculture became a vector for cultural diffusion, enabling the transmission of innovations, religious practices, artistic styles, and scientific knowledge across regions. The cultural and intellectual consequences of agriculture were equally profound. The demands of farming encouraged systematic observation of natural phenomena, including seasonal changes, weather patterns, and celestial movements. These observations informed early calendars, essential for coordinating planting and harvesting, and laid the groundwork for astronomy and mathematics. Writing systems emerged largely in response to agricultural and economic needs, including record-keeping, taxation, and trade documentation. Cuneiform in Mesopotamia, hieroglyphs in Egypt, and early Indus scripts all exemplify this connection between agriculture and the development of literacy. Furthermore, agricultural cycles shaped religious practices, myths, and rituals. Fertility, the seasons, and the interdependence of humans and nature became central themes in mythology and ritual observance. In Mesopotamia, the worship of deities such as Enlil and Inanna reflected concerns over fertility and crop production, while Egyptian religious festivals were synchronized with the inundation of the Nile. In Mesoamerica, maize deities were central to ritual life, reflecting the crop's foundational role in sustenance and identity. Thus, agriculture not only provided material sustenance, but also structured cultural and intellectual life.
Agriculture also contributed to demographic and health transformations. The shift from foraging to farming enabled population expansion as stable food supplies supported larger communities and denser settlements. Sedentary life and increased population density, however, brought new challenges, including vulnerability to famine, infectious diseases, and malnutrition associated with reliance on staple crops. Archaeological studies indicate that skeletal remains from early agrarian societies show evidence of repetitive labor, malnutrition, and disease, suggesting that while agriculture supported population growth, it also introduced novel health challenges. These demographic pressures necessitated social organization, technological adaptation, and environmental management, further demonstrating the reciprocal relationship between agriculture and societal development. Environmental management and sustainability became central concerns in agrarian civilizations. Large-scale deforestation, irrigation, and soil cultivation transformed ecosystems, requiring innovative strategies to maintain productivity. Mesopotamian and Egyptian societies developed irrigation and canal systems, while Chinese and Andean farmers employed terraces, flood control, and crop rotation. These interventions illustrate early human attempts to balance food production with environmental stewardship, highlighting the long-term ecological implications of agriculture. The success and failure of these strategies had direct consequences for societal stability, urban growth, and cultural continuity, underscoring agriculture's role as both a driver of civilization and a source of environmental vulnerability. The legacy of agriculture extends beyond ancient times, influencing subsequent civilizations and the modern world. The organizational, technological, and intellectual achievements that emerged from early farming societies provided the foundation for later political states, empires, and global economic systems. The innovations developed to manage crops, animals, and water resources informed later agricultural techniques, engineering, and scientific understanding. The cultural and religious frameworks shaped by agrarian cycles influenced artistic expression, ritual practice, and literature for millennia. Moreover, the integration of agriculture with trade, governance, and social hierarchy established patterns of societal organization that persist in various forms today. In this sense, agriculture can be understood as the central axis around which human civilization has evolved, linking material sustenance with social, political, and intellectual advancement. The study of ancient agriculture also offers critical insights into contemporary challenges. Modern societies face issues of food security, environmental degradation, and climate change, echoing concerns that were central to early agrarian communities. The successes and failures of ancient agricultural systems, including irrigation management, crop diversification, and labor organization, provide lessons for sustainable development, technological innovation, and the organization of complex societies. Understanding the role of agriculture in the past thus not only illuminates the origins of civilization, but also informs strategies for addressing the pressing problems of the present and future. In conclusion, agriculture was the transformative force that enabled the rise, consolidation, and long-term development of ancient civilizations. By providing stable food supplies, fostering technological innovation, enabling trade, and structuring social and political life, agriculture became the foundation of human progress. From Mesopotamia and Egypt to the Indus Valley, China, Mesoamerica, and the Andes, the cultivation of crops and domestication of animals shaped every dimension of civilization, from economy and governance to culture and intellectual life. The legacy of ancient agriculture persists in the structures, knowledge, and practices that continue to shape societies around the world. Without the innovation, labor, and foresight that accompanied early farming, the complex civilizations of the ancient world, and by extension, modern society, would have been impossible. In understanding the pivotal role of agriculture, one recognizes not merely a method of subsistence, but a defining principle of human history, the foundation upon which the edifice of civilization has been built.